The invitation was a blade disguised as an olive branch. Liam Sterling, a man who built his empire on my discarded dreams, was inviting me, Isabel Ross, to the 10th anniversary gala of his architectural firm. He called it a gesture of no hard feelings. I knew what it really was, a public coronation for his new life and a final humiliating nail in the coffin of ours. He expected the mousy, broken woman he'd left behind. He was about to meet the woman I became in the ashes. The invitation wasn't just paper. It was a ghost, thick, cream-colored cardstock, the kind that costs more than a week's worth of groceries used to. Liam's new corporate logo, a sleek, arrogant S that looked like a striking snake, was embossed in gold at the top. Sterling Designs cordially invites you to a decade of innovation. I traced the sharp edges with my thumb, the phantom pain of 1,000 paper cuts from our past flaring up. 5 years. It had been 5 years since I'd walked out of our shared life with nothing but a suitcase and the hollow echo of his parting words. "You were always holding me back, Izzy. You just don't have the vision." He wasn't wrong. Back then, my vision was limited to him. My world had been a small, carefully curated diorama of his needs, his ambitions, his schedule. I was the unpaid assistant, the silent partner, the sounding board for ideas I often planted myself, only to watch him harvest them as his own. I'd given up my scholarship to the Art Institute of Chicago to support his fledgling business, believing his success would be our success. It was a naive, girlish dream that shattered the day I found the receipts for hotel rooms and jewelry, purchases that weren't for me. His new wife, Chloe, was the beneficiary. She was younger, a socialite whose father owned half of the real estate Liam now built on. It was a merger, not a marriage. "You're not actually thinking of going, are you?" Maya's voice cut through the fog of memory. She was leaning against the doorframe of my studio, arms crossed, a fierce, protective glint in her eyes. My studio was my sanctuary, a chaotic, beautiful mess of stretched canvases, the sharp scent of turpentine, and the earthy smell of clay. Sunlight streamed through the massive warehouse windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny fairies. This space, this life, was the complete antithesis of the sterile, minimalist penthouse Liam and I had once called home. "He sent it to my gallery address," I said, my voice quiet. "He wanted to make sure I got it. He wants to show me what I lost." "What you lost?" "Izzy, you escaped," Maya corrected, walking over to the workbench where I'd been mixing a shade of cerulean blue so deep it felt like you could drown in it. "You lost a cheating, gaslighting narcissist who stole your best years and your best ideas. You lost sleepless nights wondering where he was. You lost the constant, crushing feeling of not being enough." She picked up the invitation, holding it between 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "This isn't an invitation. It's a summons. He wants to parade his victory in front of you. He wants to see you show up in a 5-year-old dress, looking defeated, so he and his little Barbie doll can feel superior." I looked around my studio. Canvases leaned against the walls, vibrant and alive with the emotions I'd poured into them. My series, Urban Echoes, had sold out at my first solo exhibition last year. I wasn't just surviving, I was on the cusp of thriving. I owned my own small gallery downtown, a place where I championed other emerging artists. I had built a life, brick by painful, liberating brick. And yet, that single piece of paper had the power to make me feel like that same trembling girl who packed her bags in silence, afraid to make a scene. The power imbalance had defined our relationship. He was the sun, and I was expected to be a pale, orbiting moon. He made the money, he had the connections, he held the world in his hands. I was just his wife, a supporting role. "He thinks I'm still that person," I whispered, more to myself than to Maya. "He has no idea who I am now." "Exactly," Maya's eyes lit up. "So you can't go. Don't give him the satisfaction." A different idea began to form in my mind, a slow, dangerous current pulling me in a new direction. For 5 years I had run from the ghost of Liam Sterling. I'd avoided the restaurants he frequented, the circles he moved in. I had built my new life in the shadows of his, always terrified of an accidental encounter. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to face the ghost and prove to myself that it had no power over me. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. "No," I said, my voice gaining a strength that surprised even me. I took the invitation from Maya's hand. The golden S glinted under the studio lights. "You're wrong. I have to go." Maya stared at me, her mouth agape. "Izzy, what are you talking about? It's a trap." "I know," I said, a slow smile spreading across my lips. "He's expecting a ghost. He wants to see the victim he created, but that woman is dead. He killed her, and he has no idea who he just invited to his party." The psychological conflict wasn't just with Liam, it was with the younger, weaker version of myself he had imprinted on my soul. Going to that gala wasn't about revenge, it was an exorcism. I needed to walk into the heart of my past, into his curated world of power and prestige, and not fall apart. I needed to see him and his new life, and feel nothing but the quiet hum of my own hard-won peace. "I'm not going to be his joke, Maya," I said, setting the invitation down next to my palette of brilliant, unapologetic colors. "I'm going to be his reckoning." The week leading up to the gala was a masterclass in psychological warfare, waged entirely within myself. Every morning I'd wake up with a knot of dread in my stomach, the voice of the old Izzy whispering doubts in my ear. "What are you trying to prove? You don't belong in his world anymore. They'll laugh at you." But then I'd walk into my studio, the scent of oil paint like smelling salts, and the new Isabel would take over. She was a warrior, and she needed armor. My transformation wasn't about impressing Liam. It was about embodying the woman I had become. It was a physical manifestation of an internal revolution. My first stop wasn't a designer boutique, but a place I hadn't visited in years, the storage unit where I kept the last vestiges of my former life. Tucked in the back, behind dusty furniture and boxes of forgotten kitchen gadgets, was a portfolio case. Inside were my old sketches from the Art Institute, designs for ethereal, flowing gowns that were more sculpture than clothing. I dreamed of being a textile artist once, before Liam had gently steered me toward the more practical path of supporting his ambitions. I found the sketch I was looking for, a dress designed to move like liquid moonlight, with a structured, almost architectural bodice that flowed into a cascade of silk. It was a design born from a younger, more hopeful mind, but I could now see the strength in its lines. With the sketch in hand, I went to see Madame Devereux, a semi-retired couturier whose genius was the stuff of Chicago legend. She worked out of a dusty, sun-drenched atelier in an old brownstone, and she only took on clients who intrigued her. She studied my sketch through her thick cat-eye glasses, her expression unreadable. "This is an ambitious design, mademoiselle. It requires a fabric that does not yet exist, and a woman who is not afraid to be seen." "I can handle being seen," I told her, my voice firm. "And the fabric, I have an idea." For the next 3 days, we worked side by side. I showed her a technique I'd been developing in my own art, infusing raw silk with a microfine metallic pigment, then layering it with chiffon. The result was a fabric that shimmered with an inner light, shifting from a deep midnight blue to a brilliant silver, depending on how it caught the light. It was the color of a twilight sky. Madame Devereux was enthralled, her old-world craftsmanship ignited by my modern artistic approach. She called it étoffe de lune, starlight cloth. While she and her team worked their magic, I focused on the rest of the armor. I had my hair, which I'd kept long and simple for years, cut and styled into a sophisticated shoulder-length wave that framed my face. The mousy brown was gone, replaced with a richer, darker shade that made my green eyes pop. I spent an afternoon with a makeup artist who taught me not how to hide my features, but how to highlight them, the strong line of my jaw, the arch of my brows. Each step was a reclamation. The woman in the mirror was no longer a pale reflection of someone else's expectations. She was a stranger, and I liked her. She looked formidable. The night of the gala, Maya came over to my apartment, a bottle of champagne in hand. She found me standing before the full-length mirror, staring at my own reflection. The dress was more magnificent than I could have imagined. It clung to my body in a way that was elegant and powerful, the starlight cloth shimmering with every slight movement. The neckline was a sharp, geometric cut that highlighted my collarbones, a stark contrast to the soft, flowing skirt that pooled around my feet. It was a work of art. My art. "Izzy," Maya breathed, her eyes wide. "Oh my God, you're not just going to a party. You're making a statement." "That's the idea," I said, my voice steady despite the frantic fluttering in my chest. "He's going to have a heart attack," she said, pouring 2 glasses of champagne. "Chloe is going to spontaneously combust." We clinked glasses. "To new beginnings," Maya toasted. "To closing old doors," I countered, taking a small sip. The final piece of armor was a necklace I had made myself. During the darkest days after the divorce, I'd taken a welding class. I'd found a strange comfort in melting and reshaping metal, in creating beauty from raw, unyielding materials. I had forged a simple, elegant silver choker, polished to a mirror shine. It was cool and solid against my skin, a physical reminder of the fire I had walked through to forge myself anew. As I got into the waiting car, the old Izzy made one last stand. The fear was a cold knot in my stomach. They will see you for what you are, the cast-off wife, the failed artist. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, picturing my studio, my art, my gallery. I pictured Madame Devereux's knowing smile and Maya's unwavering support. I had built an entire world for myself, a world that had nothing to do with Liam Sterling. He was a chapter, not the whole story. Tonight I was simply turning the page. "Are you ready, Ms. Ross?" the driver asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. I met my own gaze in the mirror. The woman looking back was calm, her eyes clear. She was ready. "Yes," I said, "I am." The gala was being held at the Adler Planetarium, a place Liam had chosen for its theatricality. Its domed ceiling and sweeping views of the Chicago skyline were a perfect backdrop for a man who saw himself as the center of the universe. From the moment I stepped out of the car, I could feel the energy of the event. A low thrum of self-importance, punctuated by the clinking of glasses and forced laughter. I paused at the entrance, taking a moment to center myself. The cool night air felt good against my skin. I could hear the gentle lapping of Lake Michigan against the shore, a steady, calming rhythm. Then I walked in. The effect was instantaneous. It was like a sound wave of silence radiated out from the doorway. Conversations faltered, heads turned, 100 pairs of eyes belonging to the city's elite, all fixed on me. They knew who I was. I was Isabel Sterling, the first wife, the discarded starter model, but the woman who stood before them didn't match their memories. I saw the confusion, the shock, the re-evaluation happening in real time. My dress, my étoffe de lune, seemed to drink in the ambient light of the room and reflect it back, creating a subtle aura that was impossible to ignore. I kept my chin high, my shoulders back, and walked into the lion's den, not as prey, but as an equal. And then I saw him. Liam was holding court near the center of the room, a glass of champagne in one hand, the other resting possessively on Chloe's lower back. He looked the same, impeccably tailored suit, a smile that was all teeth, an aura of supreme confidence. He was in the middle of a sentence when the hush fell over the room. He followed the gaze of his audience, his smile faltering as his eyes landed on me. For a full 5 seconds, he simply stared. The practiced charm vanished, replaced by a look of raw, unfiltered shock. His mouth opened slightly, as if to speak, but no words came out. It was as if he was seeing a ghost, but a ghost more vibrant and alive than anyone else in the room. Beside him, Chloe's perfectly manicured hand tightened on his arm. Her smile became a brittle, frozen thing. She was beautiful in a polished, predictable way, a classic blonde in a tight crimson dress that screamed for attention. But as she looked at me, a flicker of pure, unadulterated insecurity crossed her face. In that moment, she wasn't the victor. She was just a woman seeing a threat she had never anticipated. The spell broke. The murmur of conversation started again, but now it was different. It was hushed, urgent. "Is that Isabel?" I barely recognized her. "What is she doing here?" I ignored them all. My focus was on Liam. I gave him a small, enigmatic smile, a slight inclination of my head, and then I deliberately turned away, heading towards the bar as if his presence was of no consequence to me whatsoever. It was a calculated move, a reclaiming of power. I was not here to engage with him. I was here on my own terms. "A glass of your driest champagne, please," I told the bartender. As I waited, I felt a presence beside me. I didn't have to look to know who it was. The expensive, overbearing scent of his cologne was a memory I couldn't erase. "Isabel," Liam said, his voice a low, strained growl. "What the hell are you doing here?" I turned to face him slowly. Up close, I could see the faint lines of stress around his eyes that his expensive grooming couldn't hide. He looked older. "You invited me," I said simply, my voice calm and even. I took the glass of champagne from the bartender. It was a lovely gesture. I was touched. My placid response seemed to infuriate him more than an outburst would have. He was used to my tears, my emotional reactions. This cool, unbothered woman was a stranger to him. "This was not—" "I didn't expect you to actually come," he hissed, leaning closer. "And what is this costume? What game are you playing?" "No game, Liam," I said, taking a deliberate sip of my champagne. I let my eyes drift over his shoulder to where Chloe was watching us, her face a mask of anxious fury. I just felt it was time to stop hiding. "Don't you agree?" Before he could respond, a voice I recognized cut in. "Izzy, is that really you?" It was Marcus Thorne, one of the senior partners at the firm Liam had worked at before starting his own company. Marcus was a kind, older man with a gentle face and sharp, intelligent eyes. He had always been kind to me, treating me as more than just Liam's shadow. "Marcus," I said, my smile genuine now, "it's so good to see you." "My God," he said, taking my hand. He looked from me to Liam, whose face was now a thundercloud of controlled rage. "You look incandescent. I heard you opened a gallery. The Thorne Gallery on Michigan Avenue, right? My wife is a huge fan of your work. She bought one of your Urban Echoes pieces." The shock on Liam's face was almost comical. He had no idea. He had so thoroughly dismissed my art, my passion, that it never occurred to him that I could achieve success without him. He thought I was still painting sad little watercolors in a spare bedroom. "I'm so glad she enjoys it," I said to Marcus, turning my full attention to him and effectively dismissing Liam. "You must bring her by the gallery sometime soon. I have a new collection I'm preparing." I allowed Marcus to lead me away, leaving Liam standing alone at the bar, his hand clenched around his champagne flute. The power imbalance that had defined our marriage, the one he had tried to reinforce with his cruel invitation, had been completely upended in the space of 5 minutes. He had invited his ex-wife as a joke, expecting a pathetic footnote to his grand story. But the woman who showed up was a story all her own, and he was about to find out he wasn't the main character. Walking through the gala with Marcus Thorne at my side was like having a diplomatic passport. He was universally respected, a titan of Chicago's old guard architectural community, and his open admiration for me was a clear signal to everyone else. The whispers didn't stop, but their tone began to change. The pity was replaced by curiosity, the shock by a grudging respect. "I have to admit, I was surprised to see your name on the guest list," Marcus said, as we found a quieter spot near the massive windows overlooking the glittering city. I was surprised to be on it, I admitted. I suspect it was meant as some sort of closing statement. Marcus's eyes, full of wisdom, met mine. Well, if this is a closing statement, my dear, you're the one delivering it. Liam looks like he's seen a poltergeist. I couldn't help but laugh, a real, genuine laugh that felt liberating in this stuffy, pretentious atmosphere. It felt good to be seen, truly seen, by someone who had known me before and could appreciate the difference. Our conversation was easy and natural. We talked about art, about the changing face of Chicago's architecture, about his wife's charity work. He asked insightful questions about my gallery and the artists I represented. He listened, something Liam had never truly learned to do. With every passing moment, I felt the last vestiges of the timid, insecure woman I had been flaking away like old paint. From across the room, I could feel Liam's eyes on me. It was a hot, angry glare. He was used to being the center of attention, the sun in every room. But tonight, a new celestial body had entered his orbit, and it was pulling the gravity of the room with it. He was losing control, and he hated it. Several other old acquaintances drifted over, drawn by Marcus's presence. They were Liam's colleagues, clients, people who had known me as Mrs. Sterling. Their greetings were a mixture of awkwardness and awe. "Isabel, you look wonderful," said one woman, the wife of a major property developer. The last time I'd seen her, she had given me a pitying look at a charity luncheon right after the divorce was announced. Tonight, her eyes were wide with a kind of fascinated envy. "Thank you, Carol. So do you," I replied, my voice smooth as silk. They asked what I'd been up to, a polite way of asking how I'd managed to survive without Liam. When I spoke about my gallery, about curating shows and discovering new talent, I saw their perceptions shift in real time. I wasn't a divorcee living off alimony. I was a business owner, a peer. The ultimate test came in the form of Chloe. She approached our group with Liam in tow, his face set like granite. Her smile was dazzling, a weapon she wielded with expert precision. "Isabel, I'm so glad you could make it," she gushed, her voice a little too loud, a little too bright. She air-kissed the space beside my cheeks. "Liam was just saying how important it was to him that you be here to celebrate with us." It was a power play, an attempt to reframe my presence as something they had magnanimously allowed. She was positioning herself as the gracious lady of the manor and me as the charity case. "It was thoughtful of him," I said, my tone neutral. I didn't rise to the bait. I met her gaze evenly, letting the silence hang for a moment. Her smile faltered just a little. "And your dress," she continued, running a critical eye over me. "It's so unique. Did you make it yourself?" The insult was subtle, wrapped in a compliment. In her world, homemade was a slur. Before I could respond, Marcus stepped in. "It's a masterpiece, isn't it? Isabel is not only a brilliant curator, she is a gifted artist in her own right. This is wearable art." Chloe's eyes narrowed. This wasn't going according to her script. Liam, who had been silent and brooding, finally spoke. "Marcus, I need to steal you away for a moment. We need to discuss the Bennett proposal." It was a clumsy attempt to isolate me, to pull my powerful ally away. "Of course, Liam," Marcus said. But then he turned to me. "Don't you go anywhere, Izzy. I want to hear more about your upcoming exhibition." He gave my arm a reassuring squeeze before he left, a silent promise of his return. Left alone with Liam and Chloe, the temperature dropped. The thin veneer of civility evaporated. "I don't know what you think you're accomplishing by being here," Liam said, his voice low and venomous. "But this performance is pathetic. You waltz in here in some ridiculous get-up, trying to pretend you're something you're not." "And what am I, Liam?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. I didn't raise it. I didn't need to. The meek little wife you could mold and dismiss. The woman whose ideas you could steal and call your own. You're right. I'm not her. You should be grateful for that. Chloe gasped, a theatrical little sound. "How dare you? Liam built this firm with his own 2 hands." "Did he?" I looked from her perfectly outraged face to Liam's furious one. Every empire is built on a foundation, Chloe. You should ask him sometime what or who his was built on. I didn't wait for a reply. I gave them a final dismissive smile and turned, walking away with a deliberate, unhurried pace. I could feel their stunned silence behind me. I had planted a seed of doubt, a crack in the perfect facade of their life. The tide of the evening had turned. I came here expecting to weather a storm of pity and condescension. Instead, I had become the storm, and from the look on Liam's face, he was beginning to realize he had nowhere to run. The rest of the evening passed in a surreal haze. I drifted through the crowd, engaging in light conversation, accepting compliments with a grace I didn't know I possessed. I felt like an actress playing the role of a lifetime, and the character was myself. With each person I spoke to, with every shocked and impressed face I encountered, the role felt more real, more true. I wasn't pretending. I was simply being. Liam and Chloe kept their distance, but I could feel their presence like a storm front on the horizon. They were circling, whispering to each other, their unified front beginning to show cracks. Chloe looked increasingly agitated, her perfect smile now a tight, anxious line. Liam was drinking more than usual, his movements becoming sharper, more aggressive. He was a king in his own castle, and he was watching a peasant lead a rebellion. My conversation with Marcus had spread through the room like wildfire. I was no longer just Liam's tragic ex-wife. I was Isabel Ross, owner of the Thorn Gallery, a rising star in the Chicago art scene. People sought me out, no longer out of morbid curiosity, but out of genuine interest. A well-known art critic, a woman whose reviews could make or break a career, introduced herself and told me she'd been meaning to visit my gallery for months. She promised to be at my next opening. This was a world Liam had tried to keep me from, a world he'd told me I wasn't good enough for. And here I was, thriving in it, right in the middle of his triumph. The irony was so thick I could taste it. The formal part of the evening began. Liam took to the stage to give a speech. He stood at the podium, bathed in a spotlight, the very picture of success. He spoke of vision, of dedication, of the relentless pursuit of excellence. He thanked his clients, his team, and then his wife. And finally, he said, his voice resonating through the microphone, I want to thank my beautiful wife, Chloe. She is my rock, my inspiration. Her unwavering belief in me is the wind in my sails. The crowd applauded politely. I stood near the back, my champagne glass still in hand, and I watched him. He was performing, just as I was. But his performance was hollow. He was reading from a script he'd written for himself long ago, a narrative of the self-made man. It was a lie. As he spoke, my mind drifted back to the early days, the tiny apartment we shared, the stacks of takeout containers because neither of us had time to cook. Me poring over his blueprints until 3 in the morning, sketching suggestions in the margins, helping him rework flawed designs, brainstorming names for the firm he dreamed of. I remembered the night he'd been on the verge of giving up, completely demoralized after losing a major bid. I was the one who sat with him, talked him through it, and sketched out the preliminary concept for what would become his first breakthrough project, the waterfront revitalization. An idea I had sparked, a vision I had helped shape. He had taken that sketch, refined it, and presented it as his own singular genius. That project launched his career. He never once mentioned my contribution, not to me, not to anyone. At the time I told myself it didn't matter. His success was our success. Now, standing in the monument he'd built to himself, I felt a cold, hard anger crystallize in my chest. It wasn't just about a broken heart, it was about theft. He had stolen my creativity, my intellectual property, and built his kingdom on it. When the speech was over and the applause faded, he made his way through the crowd, accepting congratulations. His eyes found mine across the room. There was a challenge in them, a smug, triumphant glint. He thought he had won, that his public declaration of love for Chloe had put me firmly in my place. He was wrong. He approached me, his stride full of arrogance. Chloe was nowhere to be seen. "Quite a show, wasn't it?" he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I hope you enjoyed the party, Isabel. Consider it a parting gift, a little glimpse of the world you lost." I held his gaze, my expression unreadable. "The world I lost? No, Liam. This is a glimpse of the world I helped build, a world you took the credit for." His smile vanished. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" I took a step closer, my voice dropping so only he could hear. "The waterfront project. Does that ring a bell? Late nights, cold coffee, a desperate husband and a wife with a sketchbook. You remember that night, don't you? You told me I had a knack for seeing the bigger picture." Colour drained from his face. For the first time all evening, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He had buried that memory so deep, convinced himself so thoroughly of his own lie, that he never imagined I would dare to bring it up. "You're delusional," he stammered, his bravado crumbling. "You were a supportive wife, nothing more." "I was your partner," I corrected him, my voice like ice, "a silent one, and you wrote me out of the story. You stood on that stage and talked about vision. But you and I both know whose vision truly launched Sterling Designs." I didn't need to scream or cry. The quiet, unassailable truth was more powerful than any emotional display. I had just taken a sledgehammer to the foundation of his identity. He wasn't the self-made genius. He was a fraud. And now I knew it, and he knew that I knew it. "Enjoy the rest of your party, Liam," I said, turning my back on his stunned, ashen face. "You've earned it." I walked away, not looking back. The psychological battle was over. It wasn't about winning him back or getting revenge. It was about reclaiming my own history, my own truth. And in his eyes I had seen the one thing I came here for, the complete and utter unraveling of his lie. The atmosphere in the room had changed. The air was thick with unspoken tension. My quiet confrontation with Liam had not gone unnoticed. Though no one could have heard our words, the sight of their host, pale and shaken after speaking with his ex-wife, was enough to set the gossip mill into overdrive. I needed some air. I made my way to the outdoor terrace, a sweeping stone balcony that offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the city lights shimmering on the dark waters of Lake Michigan. The cool breeze was a relief, clearing my head. I leaned against the balustrade, closing my eyes for a moment, letting the distant city sounds wash over me. I had done what I came to do. I had faced my dragon and walked out of the fire unscathed. The rest of the night was just epilogue. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Marcus Thorne's voice was a gentle intrusion. He came to stand beside me, holding 2 fresh glasses of champagne. He handed one to me. "It's my favorite thing about this city," I said. "It always looks like it's full of promise." "A bit like yourself tonight," he observed, his eyes kind. "I saw you speaking with Liam. I hope he wasn't bothering you." "He was just reminiscing," I said, choosing my words carefully. Marcus took a sip of his champagne, studying me over the rim of his glass. "You know, I was always fond of you, Izzy. You had a fire in you, a sharp mind. I often thought you were wasted, playing the role of the dutiful wife." His validation was like a balm on an old wound. I thought that was the role I was supposed to play. "Roles are cages, if we let them be," he said wisely. "It seems you've broken out of yours spectacularly. The talk of the party isn't Sterling Designs' 10-year anniversary, it's Isabel Ross." We stood in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the city breathe. It was a moment of peace in the midst of the emotional battlefield I had just navigated. But the war wasn't quite over. The terrace doors slid open with a sharp swoosh, and Chloe stepped out. She had shed Liam and was now on a solo mission. Her crimson dress looked garish under the soft moonlight. She approached me, her heels clicking aggressively on the stone. "There you are. she said, her voice tight with forced pleasantry. She completely ignored Marcus. "I was hoping for a chance to talk to you, woman to woman." I straightened up, my internal alarms on high alert. This was not going to be a friendly chat. "Chloe," I acknowledged coolly, "I just want you to know that I understand this must be difficult for you," she began, her tone dripping with condescension. "Seeing all of this, seeing Liam so happy, it must be a painful reminder of what you lost." This was her strategy, to paint me as the jealous, bitter ex-wife, a narrative she could control. "I'm not in pain, Chloe," I said calmly. Her eyes flashed. My refusal to play the victim was infuriating her. "Oh, please, you can drop the act. Coming here dressed like that, trying to make a scene, it's all rather pathetic. You need to accept that you lost. I won. He chose me." "He didn't choose you, Chloe," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "He chose your father's money. It was a business transaction. And you chose a man who would build you a beautiful house on a rotten foundation. So in a way, I suppose you're perfect for each other." A strangled sound escaped her lips. She looked around wildly as if searching for a weapon. Her eyes landed on the full glass of red wine someone had left on a nearby table. In a move that was both clumsy and vicious, she stumbled, lurching towards me and sloshing the dark red liquid all down the front of my dress. "Oh my God!" she shrieked, her performance of shock worthy of an Oscar. "I am so sorry. I'm so clumsy." A dark, ugly stain bloomed across the shimmering fabric of my starlight cloth. It was a deliberate act of vandalism, a desperate attempt to ruin my poise, my art, my moment. The old Izzy would have crumpled, burst into tears, and fled in humiliation. But the old Izzy was gone. I looked down at the stain, then up at Chloe's triumphant, faux horrified face, and I smiled. "Don't worry about it, Chloe," I said, my voice ringing with clarity in the sudden silence on the terrace. Marcus was staring at her, his face a mask of utter disgust. "Accidents happen." Then I did something she never could have anticipated. I picked up my own glass of golden champagne. With a steady hand, I tilted it and poured the effervescent liquid directly over the red wine stain. "A little club soda or champagne is the best thing for a red wine stain," I explained to her, as if she were a child. "It helps lift it right out, you see?" The champagne fizzed, diluting the red into a pale, watery pink. The stain was still there, but it was muted, softened. My action was so unexpected, so full of calm control, that it completely defused her attack. I had taken her act of aggression and turned it into a domestic science lesson. She stared at me, speechless, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She had tried to mark me, to ruin me, and I had simply cleaned it up. "Now, if you'll excuse me," I said, handing my empty glass to a stunned but impressed-looking Marcus. "I believe it's time for me to leave. I have an early morning. Art to create, you know." I gave Chloe one last pitying look. "You can keep him," I said softly. "I'm creating my own masterpieces now." I turned and walked back through the glass doors, leaving her standing on the terrace, covered in the metaphorical splashback of her own failed attack. I had checkmated the queen, not by flipping the board, but by simply playing a better game. My exit was as quiet and deliberate as my entrance. I didn't need a dramatic farewell. The drama was in the details, in the wine stain on my dress that looked more like a watercolor painting than a mark of shame, in the stunned silence of Chloe on the terrace, and in the ghost-white face of Liam, who watched me walk towards the door from across the room. Marcus insisted on walking me out. As we passed through the grand hall, the buzz of conversation followed us. I knew what they were saying. They had witnessed the entire terrace incident. Chloe's petty act of aggression had backfired spectacularly, exposing her insecurity for all to see. My calm, controlled response had solidified the evening's narrative. I was not the victim. I was the victor. "That was the most graceful display of power I've ever witnessed," Marcus said, as we waited for the valet to bring my car. "It wasn't about power," I said, though I knew that wasn't entirely true. "It was about not letting her ruin my dress. It's one of a kind." He chuckled. "So are you, Isabel. So are you." He handed me his business card. "My wife wasn't exaggerating. She's a great admirer of your eye for talent. She sits on the board of the Contemporary Arts Fund. They're looking for a new partner to help them discover and sponsor emerging artists. The position comes with a significant endowment." I stared at the card, then at his face. This was more than just a casual offer. It was a door opening into a world of influence and opportunity I had only dreamed of. "They should be talking to you, Isabel," he continued. "Your gallery is exactly what the Chicago art scene needs. Fresh, bold, uncompromising. Call me on Monday. We'll set up a lunch with the board." The valet pulled up with my car. I turned to Marcus, a wave of genuine gratitude washing over me. This one night, this one terrifying, liberating night, had changed the trajectory of my future. I had walked in hoping for closure. I was walking out with a new beginning. "Thank you, Marcus," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "for everything." "You earned it," he said with a warm smile. As I drove away, I glanced back at the planetarium. It looked like a temple dedicated to a forgotten god. I thought of Liam and Chloe inside, left to deal with the wreckage of their perfect party. The foundation of their life together, built on his ego and her father's money, was inherently unstable. I had just exposed the cracks. The next few days were a blur. On Monday, I called Marcus. Lunch with the Contemporary Arts Fund board was set for Wednesday. I spent Tuesday preparing a presentation showcasing the artists I represented, outlining my vision for a citywide mentorship program, my passion and professionalism on full display. The story of the gala, meanwhile, had taken on a life of its own within Chicago's elite circles. The story morphed and grew with each telling, but the core elements remained the same. Liam Sterling's ex-wife had shown up looking like a goddess. His new wife had publicly humiliated herself, and Isabel Ross was a force to be reckoned with. The fallout for Liam was swift and brutal. His business was built on image and reputation. The whispers about his instability, about Chloe's crass behavior, began to affect his bottom line. But the real damage came from an unexpected source. Marcus Thorne, disgusted by Liam's and Chloe's behavior, had a private conversation with a few key players in the city's architectural community. He didn't need to say much. He just planted a seed of doubt. "It's a shame about Liam," he might have said over drinks at the club. "All that talent, but he seems to have forgotten where his best ideas came from." The story of the waterfront project, my story, began to circulate in a more coded, deniable form. It was a rumor, a piece of industry gossip, but it was corrosive. Clients, already wary of the personal drama, started pulling back. The Bennett proposal, the one Liam had tried to use to distract Marcus, was put on indefinite hold. Liam's empire, built on a stolen foundation, was starting to crumble. He had tried to use his power to humiliate me, but he had miscalculated. He failed to understand that true power isn't about wealth or status. It's about integrity. It's about owning your own story. And his was a lie. I had spent 5 years building a life. He had spent 10 years building a brand. And when tested, my life had proven to be built of stone, while his brand was nothing but a house of cards in a rising wind. A month after the gala, I was in my studio, putting the finishing touches on a new painting. It was different from my other work. Bolder, more abstract, full of color and light. It felt joyful. The partnership with the Contemporary Arts Fund had been confirmed. My gallery was expanding. My life was moving forward at a dizzying pace. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the future. I was excited by it. The buzz of my phone startled me. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hello, Izzy." The voice was thin, ragged. All the booming confidence had been stripped from it. It was Liam. "I need to see you," he said without preamble. "I don't think that's a good idea, Liam." "Please," he begged, and the word was so foreign in his mouth it shocked me into silence. "Just once, to talk, my office." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Curiosity, perhaps, or the need for a final, definitive period at the end of our long, painful sentence. His office, once the gleaming nerve center of his empire, felt different. It was still luxurious, but there was a layer of dust on the glass desk, a stack of unopened mail. The energy of the place was stagnant, defeated. He looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his expensive suit hung on him, and the dark circles under his eyes told a story of sleepless nights. Chloe was gone. She had left him the week before, her father pulling all his investments out of Sterling Designs as a final act of retribution. The merger was officially dissolved. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to a chair I didn't take. I remained standing, a silent refusal to get comfortable in his world again. "What do you want, Liam?" He paced the room, his movements agitated. "I want to understand. Why? Why did you do it? You came to my party to destroy me." I finally looked at him, really looked at him, and what I saw was not a monster, but a small, broken man. The power he had wielded over me for so long was an illusion, a costume he wore to hide his own profound insecurity. "You're wrong," I said, my voice devoid of anger. There was nothing left to be angry about. "I didn't come to destroy you. I came to save myself. I came to prove to myself that you had no more power over me. The rest, all of this," I gestured around the failing office, "this is the consequence of your own choices, your own lies." He stopped pacing and stared at me, his eyes searching my face for a flicker of the old Izzy, the one who would have comforted him even after he had hurt her. She wasn't there. "The waterfront project," he whispered, the words like smoke. I was desperate. I was going to fail. That sketch, it was brilliant. I told myself it was for us, that our success would justify it. "There is no us, Liam," I said softly. "There hasn't been for a very long time. You built your career on my silence. Did you really think it would last forever?" He finally sank into his chair, his head in his hands. He didn't cry. He just seemed to deflate, all the air going out of him. "What do I do now?" he asked the empty room. It wasn't a question for me. It was the desperate plea of a man who had lost his own story. He had spent so long playing the part of the genius architect that he had no idea who he was without the costume and the stage. My redemption was never about his destruction. It was about my own rebirth. Seeing him like this, stripped of his power, his prestige, his wife, I felt nothing. Not triumph, not pity, not even the ghost of love. Just a profound and final sense of release. He was a stranger. Our story was over. "That's for you to figure out," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "Goodbye, Liam." I turned and walked out of his office, out of his building, and into the bright Chicago sunlight. I didn't look back. There were no more ghosts behind me. The echoes of the past had finally faded into silence, replaced by the beautiful, vibrant sound of my own life, waiting to be lived. 6 months later, the Thorn Gallery was a hub of vibrant activity. The partnership with the Contemporary Arts Fund had allowed me to take on 3 new artists, and the opening night of our first joint exhibition was a massive success. The gallery was packed with critics, collectors and art lovers, the air buzzing with excited conversation. I stood near the back, watching the scene unfold. My new painting, the joyful, abstract piece I'd finished the day Liam called, hung in a place of honor. I had titled it Unwritten. Marcus found me, a proud, fatherly smile on his face. "You've done it, Isabel," he said, his voice warm. "You've changed the conversation in this city." "We've done it," I corrected him, smiling back. Our relationship had evolved into a beautiful friendship and a powerful professional alliance. He was my mentor, my champion. His belief in me had been a crucial catalyst, but I knew deep down that I had been the one to do the work. I had found my own strength. Across the room, I saw the art critic who had introduced herself at the gala. Her review of the show had been a rave, singling out my curator's eye for raw, emotional truth. The truth. That was what it had all been about. Living my own truth, unapologetically. Later that evening, after the crowds had thinned, Maya and I were closing up. "Do you ever hear about him?" she asked quietly, polishing a glass. I knew who she meant. I had heard whispers. Liam had sold his firm for pennies on the dollar and moved away. Some said he was in California, trying to start over. Others said he was living with his parents. I didn't know, and I didn't care. His story was no longer connected to mine. He was a footnote in a book I was no longer reading. "No," I said honestly, "I don't." She looked at me, her eyes searching. "Are you happy, Izzy?" I looked around the beautiful space I had created, at the art that lined the walls, at the reflection of the strong, confident woman in the gallery window. My life wasn't a fairy tale. It was real, and it was mine. It was a blank canvas, and every day I got to pick up the brush and decide what masterpiece to create. "Yes," I said, and the word was as solid and as true as the ground beneath my feet. "I really am." Isabel's journey wasn't about revenge, it was about reclamation. She walked back into her past, not to burn it down, but to retrieve the parts of herself she had left behind. She reminds us that true power isn't about the life you project to the world, but the one you build within yourself, brick by honest brick. Her story is a testament to the fact that sometimes the most beautiful art is the life we create from the ashes of who we used to be. It proves that the end of one story can be the magnificent, unwritten beginning of another. If this story of transformation and empowerment resonated with you, please hit the like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more tales of redemption and strength.